Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. Many big things to talk about today. Trump, of course, found guilty on all charges related to that hush money trial. We now have some polling and some interesting little nuggets we can get into about what this could mean politically. Still a big question mark, but some tea leaves to read there. We also have gathered for you a grouping of some of the most unhinged media reactions that I think you will certainly enjoy.
You'll like it.
We have more terrible news with regards to Ukraine. We're now getting word that the U.S. has officially said, hey, go ahead and use our weapons to strike inside of Russia. This comes as they continue to have just horrible time trying to conscript additional people. Is becoming a very serious and very sensitive issue within Ukraine. So we'll bring you that as well. We've got some interesting highlights for you from a debate between Dave Smith and Chris Cuomo. You are definitely going to want to stay tuned for that one. And obviously, huge news domestically here with regard to Israel. You have Biden announcing a ceasefire plan that he claims come from the Israelis, but there are some major questions about that. Omar Badar is going to join us, help to sort through fact from fiction. And we also have Congress officially inviting Netanyahu to address joint session of Congress, a very high honor now being given to a war criminal. We also have more Biden officials who are resigning and speaking out over basically what they allege is the Biden administration cooking the books on what exactly is happening in Israel. So some really important things to get into there.
Yes, that's right. But before we get to that, the locals transition continues, and we just have a couple more questions I know that we see very commonly. One is, how do we still get the premium show on Spotify? So that is going to be included, a link to the playlist in the premium email, the same way that you can watch your YouTube link, your locals link, etc. It's right there. You just click on it, takes you right to the app and the video. It's amazing. I've been using it now the last couple of times that I look at the show. Now, for anybody who continues to have questions, we're going to do support@locals.com, just send them an email. And if you want to go ahead and add and CC breakingpointspremium@gmail.com, Griffin and the support team over at Locals will get you squared away. But we've answered, I think, the vast majority of most questions now at this point. Things should be working smoothly. And anything that's not, we are working behind the scenes constantly, we promise, in order to make sure things are going well. So thank you to everybody. And breakingpoints.com, if you want to sign up for a subscription. Actually, I could finally start saying that again. So there we go. All right, let's go ahead and start with the Trump verdict. Obviously, that happened over the weekend. There was a great breaking news segment that we had here on the channel. So we're going to go ahead and break down some of both Trump's reactions, some interesting nuggets on polling, etc. Let's go ahead and start with Donald Trump. He appeared yesterday on Fox and Friends for an extensive interview and gave some insight into some of the political reaction that may come from him and his supporters. Let's take a listen.
Judge could decide to say, hey, house arrest or even jail. How do you face what that could look like?
I'm okay with it. I saw one of my lawyers the other day on television saying, oh, no, you don't want to do that to the president. I said, you don't beg for anything. You just, the way it is. Think of it. They have all my books. You know, they went to, for 5 years, they sued me getting my tax returns, right? At the end of 5 years, they got him. The Supreme Court actually gave it to him. That was the end of it. That was it. They never found anything. They hired the best accounting firms. I had a pure gold firm. They call it a gold-rated firm. I don't know. It's supposed to be. Who knows? But with all that stuff, for years you heard about my tax.
They never looked into the Clinton Foundation.
And they never found it. They never went all the way with the Clinton Foundation. They never went all the way with the Clinton Foundation, which is sort of interesting, isn't it? But so that could happen. I don't know that the public would stand it. You know, I'm not sure the public would stand for it. With a,
if they tried house arrest or
I think it would be tough for the public to take. You know, at a certain point, there's a breaking point.
All right, at a certain point, there's a breaking point. Did you guys see that there inside of it? No noteworthy there, though, to me, Krystal, is obviously both the hard cut that comes from Fox and Friends when he's like, yeah, maybe, you know, I could go to jail. He seems to believe that this is going to be good for him as a result. Now, we have no idea whether any of that is true. What we do know, though, is that, well, look, we can attest to this, too, from our own ratings. We made sure to cover the Trump trial because we knew that the eventual result was going to be important. But let's just say most people did not care very much about it. But the actual verdict itself, that cracked the barrier in a way that we haven't seen with Trump and the trial-related news in a long time. Even CNN broke some of this down for what the attention looked like. Let's take a listen.
Google searches for Donald Trump up, look at this percentage, up 3,233% at the time of conviction versus the hour before, Kate. Americans were really interested in this verdict. This reaches the Google search for Trump a post-presidency high on Thursday. So Americans might not have been interested before, but they were definitely very, very interested in this verdict on Thursday.
Interest, though, of course, we cannot say translates into impacts one's vote. No one knows how or even if the verdict impacts Donald Trump's political future. But what's the case that you're seeing in the numbers that it does not hurt him?
Yeah, what's the case? We'll start here that it doesn't hurt him. This is a poll number that we've looked at before. Trump voters who say they'd be less likely to vote for him if he was convicted. Of course, these numbers were before the conviction. And very few Trump supporters said they would be less likely to support him. You know, May 2024, 7%. April 2024, 5%. March 2024, 10%. Very few Trump supporters said they'd be less likely to support him. Biden versus Trump margin, pre-conviction. In early May, this was a Marquette University Law School poll among likely voters. Trump was ahead by 3 points. But they asked a hypothetical. When asked if Trump was convicted, would it change your vote? Take a look at this margin. Now we see Joe Biden ahead by 5 points. Now, of course, this is a hypothetical question. We don't know if the hypothetical will actually come to fruition.
Yeah, I think that's actually the best way to point at it, Krystal, which is that, it's not going to have much of an impact amongst people who are Trump voters. That hypothetical Trump conviction question, that's really, it's difficult because that could have been factoring in the January 6th trial, the Georgia trial, the documents trial, all of which he faced far more political peril if convicted. And what this verdict actually reminded me was what the impact of those trials and eventual convictions would have looked like, because clearly it broke through the public consciousness once the actual verdict came through. But on this one, because it is related to a 2016 hush money sex scandal type thing, it does appear to me more baked in. We'll see, and at least bolster some of the Trump claims of being persecuted, at the very least his own supporters and others think that. Let's put this up there, please, on the screen. Trump raised almost $53 million in a single 48 hours after the trial. They said 24 hours later after they raised an initial $35 million before. But you can see very clearly that this has brought in more money in single small dollar donations to the Trump campaign than any previous day in the 2024 race so far, and even matches some of those big days that that Joe Biden has found with the big dollar fundraisers that he's been throwing in New York City.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you that I think there could be a couple point change in the polls that probably lasts temporarily.
Exactly.
If I had to predict, there's a big question mark. I mean, the other question mark is what happens at sentencing, because it's one thing to be found guilty. It's another one if he's actually facing some prison time, although, the legal analyst that Ryan and I talked to actually had run against Alvin Bragg in the primary for DA. She believes there is zero chance that he faces prison time over this, so take that for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, I feel like people already knew about this story. It's a long time till Election Day. If I had to guess, it doesn't really move the needle that much, but you never know. I mean, to make the other case, play devil's advocate here, I did see polling saying that most people did not think he would be found guilty. So there was a gap between the expectations and what actually happened. So in that way, the fact that, oh my God, he actually was found guilty. Maybe he's not Teflon Don. Maybe for independents, that does move the needle. But, I'm also seeing people on the right who are making the case that this is gonna actually help Donald Trump. I just don't buy that at all. His people are already with him. They're already voting for him. The Republican base is already, you got Nikki Haley bending the knee and everybody coming around. So I think that they were already locked in. They were already voting for him. Yes, he's going to raise some money off of it. Okay, he was already going to have lots of money. The billionaire class is going for him big time this time around too. So he's going to be fine on that front. And the resistance liberals, they're already obviously all in for Joe Biden. Question mark is whether this changes some independent views on the margins. And like I said, if I had to guess, temporarily, maybe. Over the long term, it probably all evens out.
Let's dig into some of that. Let's put this up there on the screen and actually look. This was a snap poll. This is what we have so far. This is from YouGov. They say 50% of Americans agree with the guilty verdict in the Trump hush money case. But what does that mean? That means that 50% also don't necessarily agree or are not sure, right?
Yeah, 30. I mean, it is a pretty clear break. You've got a majority, 50% saying, yeah, he's guilty, and only 30% saying no. So it is pretty clearly on the side of people agreed with the result.
Fair enough. But you've got the 19% 19% saying not sure. I guess the 19% not sure and the 30% to me is just like kind of a wash in terms of not, this is exactly what you said. Does guilt then translate to changing my vote? So obviously there's a major partisan breakdown. Let's continue to go to the next one because there's some more interesting data here. Post-verdict, more Americans say Trump got a fair trial than say that he didn't. Here again, you see the breakdown. 47% say yes, 17% not sure, 37% say no. So basically the 37%, that's gonna be the hard Republicans. 17%, roughly some crossover between like a Republican, a never Trumper type Republican plus an independent, and then you got Democrats and more independent-leaning Democrats who are going to say, yes, he got a fair trial. Basically can see that in the breakdown, both in the independent number and in the Democratic number. Amongst the people who say Trump is guilty, the same thing. But let's go to the next one, because that's actually where this is kind of what strikes home to me. Most Americans say that Trump has at least probably committed crimes, but few think he will go to prison. So when you say, do you think that former President Trump has ever committed any crimes? Even 28% of Republicans, or sorry, even 12% of Republicans say definitely. 28% say probably. That is, I have always contended this on Trump. It's like, oh, you're telling me that the man who frequently bragged about his sexploits in the New York City tabloids, going to the point about anonymously calling in under a false name to plant stories about his own sexual prowess, cheated on his wife and covered it up in a hush money case? I mean, I'm just shocked, I tell you. Or whenever the New York Times was like, wow, Trump didn't pay his taxes. I'm like, wait, so you're telling me that the guy who said on camera only a sucker and a loser would pay his full tax share didn't pay his taxes? Yeah, no shit. That's where it comes down to me. Now, is that gonna impact my vote? Probably not. Same, I think, for a lot of people at this point, especially with a case that goes all the way back to the 2016 campaign, in which we lived thousands of hours of cable news coverage through Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, Michael Avenatti, and all of that. So that's basically just where I see it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, so a few things. I do think the assessed level of Trump criminality is probably higher than most other politicians, but I also think that probably if you ask this question about any range of elites, there is a bedrock assumption among most Americans that these people probably committed some crimes in part to get where they are.
Very good point.
But I also have always thought, you know, because we've talked a lot, and it's important to talk about the differences between these various cases that Trump is facing and get into the details and really try to explain it as best as possible. But I also do feel like because you have so many people who are like, this guy has definitely committed some crimes, are they going to be outraged that like somebody's taking issue with the jury instructions that were given to this jury? No, they're going to feel like, yeah, you know, you committed crimes. At some point, you're going to have to pay the piper. You probably got away with it much longer than, you know, any one of us would. And so that's why I'm not surprised to see really pretty clear majorities, not just in this poll that we showed you, but in other polls as well, saying, yeah, I think he's guilty. Yeah, I think that the trial was more or less fair. And as I said before, you know, the Democratic and Republican numbers, those are locked in. They weren't going to change their mind no matter what. But you do see the independents on this question siding more with the Democrats. Now, to go back to my original point, do I think this really changes a lot of votes? Do I think this really, you know, shakes up the landscape for the presidential race? No, because ultimately there are a lot of other factors at play, and it's a long time till Election Day. But to those people out there who are like, oh, this is going to be great for Trump, and this is going to this is guaranteed. I've heard people saying like, this is going to guarantee him, you know, his trip back to the White House. I think that's complete nonsense. The best he can hope for is that it's basically a wash, which I do think is probably the ultimate most likely outcome.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that largely, I mean, as you said, there's a major Republican incentive, it appears, to say this is going to be affirmatively good for Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think that that is the case. There's a major Democratic incentive to say this is going to be affirmatively horrible for Trump. This is going to be affirmatively great for Biden. I'm like, again, I don't think that that is the case. This is one of those where if you look deeply at why, this is my personal favorite, so like, this is going to make Trump popular amongst black people. I'm like, maybe let's just put that one to the side. But then, you know, if I actually dig into why Trump support is higher amongst black voters and younger voters this time around, it's very simple. Black voters, people who are largely economically disenfranchised, want a candidate who represents, quote, major change. And to them, Trump is a roll of the dice. You ask the white boomers why they are largely consolidating around Biden, or at least voting for him in much larger shares and sticking with them, they don't want major change because their life is mostly fine. As usual, it all comes back to actual fundamentals and where you think things can go from here. So I just want people to really put that at the center of how they think about how others will vote, is that they're probably just like you. You know, this trial and all this other stuff doesn't really have much of an impact. But at the end of the day, the media, you know, is unable to really represent some of that. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.